So the Alberta government and the federal government, they've actually teamed up on something, and they're going to provide internet service to rural areas at a cost 5,300% higher than it would be if people just got the service themselves. It's nuts, and the program should be scrapped. But let's get into it. Like, access to high-speed internet's been a need for modern living, fair enough, much like telephone service has. I mean, it's changed. And like the early days of telephone services, rural areas, they take longer to get the infrastructure. You know, there used to be party lines until surprisingly not too long ago. Living in rural areas is a choice, and residents in them understand you won't necessarily have access to as many services or as quickly as urban dwellers do, or at least they should understand that. Now, I live near a pretty massive urban center, but I'm on a rural property, and our quest for decent internet access has been long and painful. Well, cities have had cable and fiber optic internet options for decades now. Lots of rural areas have had terrible provision, if any options at all. At my place, we had to set up a small tower on the roof to receive this wireless signal, which provided unstable, slow internet service at a high cost and terrible customer service. We then switched to using a hub to get service through our cellular provider. That was expensive and pointless, as the local cell tower couldn't keep up with demand, and the speeds were nearly as bad as dial-up if they weren't totally crashed. Now, despite being only 800 meters from a fiber optic cable on a nearby highway, we can't get fiber optic services because it's too expensive for any provider to install a stub line down in my community. Fiber optic cable is difficult and expensive to put down. It's not like copper power wires or telephone lines. Finally, though, we heard about this new option a few years ago. Starlink was offering high-speed service. It was going to cost $700 for the hardware, and we'd have to go on a waiting list. We eagerly jumped on the option, and when the unit finally arrived 6 months later, we set it up on the roof of our house with some trepidation. Our home's surrounded by trees, and I'm in a valley, so we were worried the satellite system might not work well. Our fears were unfounded. The system was true plug and play. You just place it on the roof, power it up, and it orients itself to the best signal. It's almost creepy. There's no need for a professional installation or tedious aiming of the dish like with your satellite TV services and other internet options. And best of all, we immediately had high-speed internet service. And that speed and reliability has only gotten better since we put it up there, even though most of our neighbors now have Starlink as well. It's not overloading the system. Now, it's a little depressing that the price has fallen to $200 for a system now, and you don't need to have a contract, but that's fine. Good for those who waited. Now let's look at what the provincial and federal governments have been up to in the issue. Well, governments at every level have been promising to bring high-speed internet to rural areas for over a decade. It's a popular promise to make, but apparently a difficult one to keep. Until Starlink came, all that most rural dwellers saw were promises and spending announcements. And most didn't even see that because our internet was too crappy to surf the news and find out. The promised spending has been significant, though. The Alberta government partnered with the federal government to spend $780 million on what they're calling the Alberta Broadband Fund. In bits and pieces, they figure they're going to bring high-speed internet service to the entire rural Alberta population by 2030 or so. Yeah, right up, when we all go to electric cars. Then they break that fund up to make grand announcements, like the one last June, trumpeting they're going to bring high-speed internet to 1,440 rural Alberta homes for the low price of $10,625 per household. That's not a typo. Only the government could manage to take a service that cost $200 per household and manage to soak taxpayers for $10,625. The announcement didn't provide a timeline either, so we can assume it'll probably be a few years before those 14,000 homes see this new service. In the meantime, the $200 Starlink option usually arrives within a couple of weeks of ordering it. There's no more waiting times. It's available in every part of the province. Now, on top of that last announcement, the government still has $620 million laying around dedicated to this project of high-speed internet. The Starlink dishes are appearing on rooftops like daisies already. Rural citizens aren't waiting for the government to provide something in years that they can get now in weeks. The government's definition of high speed, by the way, is 50 megabytes per second. Starlink's already at over 100 megabytes per second. It's just not even in the realm. Some people are claiming we shouldn't become dependent on a service provided by a billionaire like Elon Musk. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but the government isn't providing local mom and pop internet providers. You're going to be just as dependent on a different bunch of billionaires. With the Rogers internet crash and periodic internet service losses due to fiber optic strikes, let's not pretend that non-Starlink options are any more reliable. Governments like to pretend they operate at top efficiency and there's no room for cuts anywhere. And of course, we know that's bunk. Well, here's an area for an easy cut. With the Universal Broadband Fund, we could just cut that now. Nationally, it's $3.2 billion. Sure, there's some contracts that have to be bought out, but hey, why throw good money after bad? By the time the government manages to string those internet services to rural homes, most have already gotten satellite internet anyways. It's like laying out landlines to new urban houses for phones that are never going to be used. We need to call out and dump this fund now. It's flushing tax dollars down the toilet that, yeah, we could probably spend somewhere else for better funds.